You've tuned into Tomcat Tales, the story of Ashland's legends from the gridiron, the court, the diamond, and beyond. It's a deep dive into Ashland Tomcat sports history. Now, here's your host, Mark Maynard.
Well, welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Tomcat Tales, and this is number 22. And today we have a special guest. He's let you know up front, he's a close friend of mine. We grew up together, and he has done a whole lot of different things with the Tomcats, and he's done a whole lot of different things in football beyond the Ashland Tomcats. But I am talking to Rick Sang. And Rick, how you doing, man? Everything good?
Everything's great. I really appreciate the call and the chance to go down memory lane here a little bit. I hope I can recall some good memories for us here on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot we'll both remember and we'll both forget. We've forgotten a whole lot more than we remember. I got my handy Tomcat record book in front of me. That helps me to bring things back. Rick, you at Ashland, one thing I found very interesting, just looking back at everything, your sophomore year, you weren't very big. They list you at 5'9", 145. Did you grew that much between sophomore and junior year? Because you end up 6 foot 175 as a senior, which that's a lot, to gain.
Yeah, I think so. Plus, Mark, I think you and I are thinking similar, except a year apart. But I started school. I was like, I guess 5 when I started first grade, turned 6. I was one of those kids that just started. I was on the early end of, so I was pretty young too. So I guess I just turned 15. And right. So I don't recall being that small, but that sounds about right. I know how it was when my senior year. I grew up quite a bit, but also at that point between that sophomore year and our junior year, we had a tremendous weight program with Coach Conley, so it wasn't surprising. I picked up some weight and then grew a little bit of height too.
Right. And we've talked about this before, just privately, you and I, but at Coles, really, and even in the Kiwanis Bowl, you didn't play much if you played at all your freshman year, and the trajectory at that point for you wouldn't seem to have been that this guy's going to be an all-state football player, by the time he's a senior. It's just kind of interesting, and like I say, your sophomore year, I don't know how much you really got to play that year. That was a decent team for Ashland. They went 6-5, and they were, of course, coming off a great season that the year before. But do you remember much about that sophomore season?
The sophomore season at Ashland, I remember the one play I got in, and it's kind of a funny story. Was against Russell as the last few seconds of the game, and Coach Conley, they called a pop pass, and I was like a tight end position, and that pop pass, you just, as soon as you step across that line, look for the ball, it's coming. And they threw me a pass. I caught it, and somebody on Russell just jacked me right in the jaw. They hit me so hard, and then I held on the ball, and I got up, and then I was kind of looking around for the huddle, and next thing you know, the game was over. And I probably told you this before, but back then, the Ashland Daily Independent used to always put the stats. It seems like it's on Thursday. All the stats for the previous week would come out. And what was kind of funny about it, that was a big deal. Seeing all the Tomcats, being a part of it. It was like growing up in the NFL at Ashland. The Tomcats were the NFL players. And so I get to be a part of that. And I caught a pass, my first play ever, caught a pass. And then I'm looking for the stats. The paper comes. I'm right there at the house on Garden Avenue, open it up. And I'm looking down the stats. I knew I'd be toward the bottom. Looked toward the bottom. I didn't see my name. I saw Greg Jackson, 4 yards reception. They had recorded the reception to somebody else. They recorded Greg Jackson and not me. So I was my first funny moment. And, but, it was funny. I've told Greg he's probably forgotten that, but there's 4 yards there floating around there that I paid dearly for. Somebody hit me pretty hard for it, but it was all right. It was just one of those things I was looking for my name and in the paper.
Well, and it's funny because, everything we took from this book was stuff we took from the paper. So Greg's name is in there as 1 yard, one catch for 4 yards.
I think it's 4 yards, and Greg, yeah, that's fine. I'm sure Greg picked it up somewhere else.
But it's in there from that 1973 season. Of course, we didn't mention it earlier, but you were a member of the Jaws team in 1975. You know, probably, I mean, one of the most beloved teams in Ashland history. You know, we're going to get to that, but just to let people know, kind of that don't know you played at Ashland from 73, 74, and 75 seasons. Of course, your dad, legendary coach, high school coach, coached 50 years of high school football, which is just like that will never happen. I mean, people will not do that now. You won't ever find that. So you grew up in a football home, and of course he coached in West Virginia. Most of his career, I mean, he started off as an Ashland Tomcat coach back in the 50s.
Right.
But
his first job was a Tomcat. First job, he was an Ashland Tomcat in 51.
Yeah. So who was the head coach then for Ashland? Do you remember?
Oh, I'm not sure. If you mention the name, I might know. I know, of course, Coach Miller was on that staff.
Right.
I just can't remember the name of the head football coach at that time. I know I have a picture of him, but I just can't think right off the top of my head.
Was it Eblin, maybe?
I said we drive. Pardon?
Charles Eblin.
I think that's who it was. I believe it was.
Yeah, that's who it was. He coached, of course, like you said, with Rex Miller, and Bob Carter was the other assistant. So back then.
That was it. Yep. That was it. And I remember one of those coaches lived, I thought it was him, lived over on Blackburn Avenue. I remember when later years in life, Dad would drive down Blackburn. He'd always point out a house. He said, Coach so-and-so, he lived right there. And I think that was the head coach. But he coached on that staff in 51. And, I have the letter from Cam Henderson, the legendary Marshall coach, who wrote my dad's first recommendation coaching letter to apply for a coaching job. And obviously it worked. He got a job there at Ashland.
Wow. How about that? That's something else. Well, we're going to do a separate podcast on your dad and your relationship and just some of the things that he did in his life later. But anyway, I just wanted to mention to folks that your dad, Bob Sang, was a great man and a fantastic coach for all these years. And was it tough being a coach's son, or how did some of that go? We'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll move on. But how was that, Rick? I mean, did he get to see you play much? He probably didn't really, because he was playing on Friday night.
No, he really didn't. The Friday night thing was tough once he got into high school, and he did. You know what? It's funny growing up. It wasn't tough. He was I saw the difference in him at home. And then I would be at a halftime at a game when I was a kid at Fairfield Stadium. I would see him so intense in the halftime talk or on the field. And then, it was funny. He could come right off that field after the game. I'd seen so intense, and he'd go, hey, he'd give my mom a hug, kiss, and he would grab me, hey, you all doing okay? And he's just like talking calm like he was at home. And so I would see that difference there, but he separated. I could see a difference in him if they lost a game. I remember he used to take me up to Bobby Lee's up in Callisburg. I get my little crew cut haircut. And I remember sitting there one time just watching him thinking, he wasn't talking as much, but he was never just an awesome, loving man there. But it wasn't tough. I wanted to live up to expectation. I mean, he didn't put any pressure on me at all, but it was just instilled in me. I wanted to do well for him. I never wanted to disappoint him and my mom. So that came across there. But I think also growing up, I knew people knew him. As a kid, I just knew a lot of people knew him, and I didn't know accountability and all that, but I knew right away that I had to walk a straight line pretty quick because, a lot of people knew who Dad was. And so it was not at all tough from that regard. It was just, and plus I tell you, it was a great experience growing up because I grew up around Huntington High players at that age when I was up in Huntington quite a bit. And so, I was around those athletes. I tell everybody in my camps today that I've been around this age athlete my entire life, 15 to 17-year-olds. I've been around that age my entire life because of going up to practice with him. And so I think it helped mature me in a way for football.
Yeah, yeah. Well, obviously that's all been great for you too, because you've made a career out of football really with Ray Guy pro kicking camps that you've been doing for, gosh, I guess close to 30 years now. You've been involved with that, and
actually, I've run with it. It really has. It's been It's been probably, Mark, I started my first camp for Coach Kidd at Eastern around 1981, so it's probably over 35 there. But Ray Guy and I have been together close, like you said, it's probably 25 years. Ray Guy and I have done that. So,
wow. So you've been so 40 years you've been involved with kicking camps. That's crazy. It really is, and still going strong. I know you've had to battle through COVID, but you guys are doing what you can, and hopefully we got better days ahead next spring and summer if we can get this thing out of here.
Yes.
But
yes.
Anyway, get back to the Tomcats. Then we're going to move on to some other things. But your junior year, really, that was a year where you played a lot, obviously. And when I look back and think back at your career, of course, your junior year was my senior year, and that Ironton game was almost like that was so big, and I know that had to be big for you. Just to set the stage for people, Tomcats were behind 13-8, I guess it was, and 13-7 maybe, and or 6 maybe. I'm sorry, 13-6, I guess. Yeah, because late in the quarter, it's a tough game. It's the fourth game of the season, and Greg Eastep you connect for a touchdown pass. That brings you within 2. And then I think you all ran maybe the same play again on the 2-point conversion and connected again, beat Ironton at Ironton, always big for the Tomcats. That has to be one of your favorite memories of being a Tomcat, that game.
Well, yeah, it was. It happened so quick. I started the season off in 1974. I was starting in defense as a defensive back, and then I'm not sure what happened, injuries, whatever. But I ended up taking over the starting position offensively at receiver as well. And then that game, the build-up, you just know from a young age that's a huge game, and we're playing at Ironton, and they had they had some great run back in Alfonso Johnson, I think, and then they had a real fast guy named Cockrell. They just had some great players on the team, well coached, obviously, just a big physical game, and it just happened so quick. It's just like and I can still remember in the huddle, just watching Greg. It's like Greg looked at me, and that play came in, and he knew it was big, and I just listened to Greg, and we did growing up, and he threw that football just right on the money. I mean, Lord, it could have stuck me in the face mask. He threw it so good to me to catch it. So I made a catch there, and then without thinking, I remember Coach Conley they came right back in. I mean, everybody's excited, and that the play happened, and everybody's so pumped, and all of a sudden the play comes back in. They call, I think, the same play, maybe to the other side. And anyway, he threw the ball again, and I look back on that and think about the guts of throwing that play again right down there on the goal line, and it's such a huge play. And I remember they were interviewing Coach Conley after the game, and what he was saying, he always said something like, ties are like kissing your sister. And he didn't want to, he didn't want to go for the tie. He wanted to go for the win. And so it was such something I was to share with Greg, all those years, just to, have that experience. But you're right. That was a huge moment in my life. I'll tell you something. My mom and my dad got to watch that game, which was even better.
Oh, wow.
They had an open game, and he got to watch that. And so that was a big moment. I was real proud of that, being a part of that, being part of the team and helping that situation.
Yeah. Now, we had talked before you got on here about, because I thought that might have been your first Tomcat touchdown, but actually it wasn't. So tell us about that one.
The first one?
Yeah.
The first touchdown? Yeah, it was, well, it's, when something like that brings up a memory in class one time. Coach Holzapfel, Mike Holzapfel, that was coaching there at the time. I remember he had us in class, and he said, he was making an analogy in class regarding something, and he said, usually the first time you score a point for a team or you do this, he said, that is the most memorable moment of your career. And he said, Rick, what is the most memorable moment of your, playing football at Ashland? He asked me in class, I said, the Ironton game. It wasn't my first touchdown. The Ironton game was. So So I brought up the Ironton game, and it's funny, we're talking, and my initial thought, my first touchdown was a punt return, but it was actually an interception, and it was early in the season there in 74. And I had an interception. I can remember making the catch, Coach Ross did such a great job coaching us to how to break on the football. We practiced it, and you could just read the quarterback, and so he helped us on that aspect of it. I had a real good jump on the ball and caught it. And I remember going down the sidelines. If you're in the home stands, I was going down to the left. I was on the home side going down the sidelines and got to score. And in my memory, and I'm not 100% sure, but I believe in my memory that I remember Terry Bell. I'm almost positive that was a situation where Terry was such a fast athlete. He could run just so agile. I remember looking on the film, he got hurt on that play, but he was hustling over to get a block for me. And he got hurt on that play. But that was my first touchdown I can remember going in. Again, I never really thought about it. It just kind of happened. They just instilled and drilled us so much in practice about reactionary things and plays. And we were well coached, so I give a whole lot of credit. I'm pretty young, and like you said, I'm not very big, but we were so well coached. I attribute a whole lot of that. And with that coaching, you score a touchdown like that, or you get an interception, your confidence level just soars, because now you're thinking, I can do this. I can play this game.
Right. That is big for sure. Interesting, that 74 season, you all started off 5-0, and I think some injuries, and of course, it was a strong junior class of players too. Who guys like yourself and Chuck Anderson and Greg Jackson and guys that were just getting some real significant playing time, for the first time. And like you said, I think gaining some of that confidence, getting that first down or getting that first touchdown or whatever else. And I think that was a real building block, I think, for that Jaws team, that so many of the juniors on that team played significant roles, that year. And then going into their senior year, they were pretty experienced.
Well, we were around some great, some just winning attitude athletes. Think about this, Mike Gothard. I'm playing with Mike Gothard, with Greg Eastep. Got to play with, Mark Hickman and some of those guys. Of course, he's when I was a sophomore, and those are some guys that I just always, like you said, grew up in the neighborhood. We always looked up to, and just, everybody says it, but they were tremendous role models, just tremendous people and leaders and work ethic. And so, that really helped having some great guys ahead of us too, and not to mention coaches.
Yeah. And like I say, great coaching staff. You're in an era there, for Coach Conley, his greatest time really, was that, the year before when you were a freshman. Of course, Ashland goes to the state championship game. Year before that, they won 11 games. The tradition was really kind of getting built back up again. During that time, it was a great time to be part of the Tomcat program. With
I remember my parents. Right. Well, and growing up for me, it really influenced me. In '67, I wasn't old enough, and evidently my mom and dad kind of wanted to make the trip without the kids. So we went with my grandparents up in Barbersville, West Virginia. We were up there during the '67 championship. So my parents, mom and dad, went down to watch that championship game, the '68 team or the '67 team win the state championship. And then, like you said, then Dad and Mom took us to the '72 Tomcat championship down at the last game, I guess, was Stoll Field. We played down there. And then so we followed up my sophomore year coming right into Ashland at '73. We're just right after that season. So, we were just, the tradition and everything leading up to that was just phenomenal. It just kind of helped us kind of carry it on. Those people were instrumental in helping us carry it on, having a great team. I'll say this too, on the Tomcat Jaws team, we were like sophomores, and they took us over to scrimmage over in Rock Hill. The field, I still drive by that sometimes. The field's there, but they've got something else, like a little farm there now. But I remember the coaches at the end of that game, that scrimmage we had, Coach Conley and Coach Rock, they brought us together and said, we believe this is going to be a state championship team right here. You all comprise of the players that's going to be that. And that was obviously Terry Bell, Chuck, and everybody. And I mean, we can just remember them saying that to us. And that's when you're that young and you got those people like Coach Conley looking in the eye and just telling you something, you're a believer. You believe, he's instilling something in us that he really believes.
Yeah. Wow. You all can conclude that your junior season with game against Boyd County. Obviously, huge game always. And Boyd County, this was their penultimate team, really. The year before they were really good, got to the state finals, and played and lost to Paducah. And they come back with, Rob Cheney and Terry Keelan and Jeff Rife, and man, that team was really good. I mean, they were ranked number one, in their class, and but they still had to beat Ashland to go to the playoffs. So, huge game. I never forget, and I don't know if you even remember this, but you all started off in a crazy set. I think there was like the center and two guards. Everybody else was split out, and Gothard was in shotgun formation, and everybody else was spread out all over the field. You all got the opening kick, and the first play from scrimmage was that. And Boyd County, they were going back and forth and running, and Coach Scott called a timeout, and because he was worried about what was going to happen here. Do you remember that at all?
I vaguely remember. I hadn't really thought about that until you said that. I vaguely remember doing something because, like we had talked about before, Mike Gothard was throwing the ball some during that game, and but I had forgotten about that. We tried that, and I think if I remember right, Martin, the year before we played them pretty dang good. We almost beat them down at their place.
Almost beat them. 14-13, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure when Kirk had a long punt return for a touchdown or something. Anyway, we came back.
No, you know what? I'll tell you what you might remember about that. There's a couple things. One, Wendell Fugit picked up a fumble or something and returned it for a touchdown. Long return for a touchdown. And Hal Kendall, they did the fumble Rooski. Do you remember that?
Yes, I remember that. Hal could run. Hal could run like a deer. Boy, he was fast. Hal Kendall. I didn't remember if it was a fumble return. I couldn't remember. I remember Wendell having a great play.
Yeah.
I just remember that, but we came so close to beating them. I thought Kurt might have had a punt return along something there, but maybe it was just I'm thinking of Wendell's. But yeah, we had a great game. Hal Kendall, it's funny you brought it back. Great member there, great hurdler, great athlete.
Oh yeah.
We played the Cheney Keelan teams pretty dang tough. Those two seasons we played them pretty tough.
Yeah, of course. And the last game was, like I said, the game at Putnam. The last game of your junior season, and the final was 20-8. You all hung with them the whole game, and actually you got a touchdown in that game, the only touchdown for the Tomcats in that game, and it came on a pass from Gothard. I don't know if it was a halfback pass or if he was quarterbacking at that time, because he played some quarterback in that game as well. Because I think Coach Conley was just trying to mix things up a little bit and try to, you got to shock them. You got to do some things that are going to shock them. And I think you all did, and the defense played great that game, of course, It
was a good game. It was a Putnam Stadium there too.
Yeah. So anyway, you kind of finished that, like you said, maybe you got some confidence from that season, and not just you, but a lot of these other guys that ended up comprising the Jaws football team. I'd never heard about them telling you, you guys as sophomores, that you had the makings of a state championship team, but they did obviously see something in you all that was special.
Yeah, it was just you had all those guys on that team. You had Casey and Terry and Chuck, and just had Raymond Hicks and Terry Lewis. I just had a lot of players on that team that they just could see that. And I remember it was at Rock Hill. I remember it was right over there. They just looked us in the eye and told us that, and because we always would reflect back on that as well. But I'll tell you something on that season, a junior season, something that Mark, some of those things that happened, I just again, my experience in at Coles, I think it was 7 seconds. I got in the last 7 seconds of the Kiwanis Bowl, and I just didn't play. And it was the crazy thing. I felt like I always excelled in the parking lot when we were playing touch football. I always felt I excelled there. I excelled at playing Sandlot when we played together over in Stafford's Field. I always excelled, but for some reason at Coles I just didn't get to play that much and at all. And then we got thrown in. I got in on a tackle, a big old gang tackle. And then so when I got to Ashland and that thing started happening my sophomore year, I got in there and got to play got a little bigger. And then junior year when it happened, and what was really, I guess, culminated the junior year, I totally did not see this coming. I made the all-area team. And,
wow.
And for me, when they told me that, Coach Conley told me, I just really didn't even see that coming. I honestly didn't. I mean, it was just, and again, that was one of those things that just inspired me to work hard, even harder. You know, I always felt like I was working hard anyway, but I made it, and I can remember the day how you always, it used to be done with the newspaper. They used to come over and had all the players come from the area came to Blazer that year. And I remember Keelan and Cheney and all these studs from all the great players in the area. And I got to sit with them. I just remember sitting. I was I was grinning just ear to ear because I'm sitting with all these great athletes around there. Gothard's on the team, all these. And so I'm sitting there a part of these guys. And I'm thinking, well, I slipped in here some way, but I'm so happy to be a part of it. And so it's just those things like that. It's just funny the whole environment, or nowadays they call it the culture, but the whole thing at Ashland is just such a winning, and it just really inspired you to excel and want to do better, and so it was just the environment. I have to give a lot of credit to the Ashland tradition, but Coach Conley, I mean, he was huge. He was just huge how he drove us.
Yeah, you were also honorable mention All-State as a junior. From going from 7 seconds to playing 7 seconds in the Kiwanis Bowl 2 years before to All-State honorable mention as a junior, that's a pretty big leap too. And all area is a big. We always knew that was a big honor for kids, and man, kids loved making that team. Loved being a part of that, and I think a lot of it was just what you said, just being able to associate with some of these guys that were, that you felt like, man, this guy's really good. I don't know why I'm here, but this guy's really good.
Well, it's funny you just said something. I'll tell you how big a deal it was to me. I don't even remember the honorable mention All-State. I remember all area. I mean, I don't even remember that. And it was just
the all area team. It started in 72, I think. So it was still pretty new. You're talking 74. It's only 3 years old at that point. And I remember the reason for starting that was because we felt like our area got slighted all the time when it came to All-State. Kentucky's such a long state. It's not a big state, but it's real long from end to end, from east to west. It's real long. You don't get to see, like if we live in the east, you don't get to see players in the west at all. You might get to see them in Lexington. You might get halfway across the state, but it was always difficult picking all-state teams too. I know, just as a sports editor, trying to determine, I don't know who these guys are from Paducah, or Murray or some of those places, and they don't know who people were from Ashland, So I tried to make some inroads with some of those guys and talk to them, and we would trade votes. We would say, who you got? That's good, So it helped both of us, to be able to do that. But all area was always a bigger deal for our kids around here, and that's interesting to hear your take on that.
Well, and they pulled out the uniforms. We got to put on a uniform, and we were all together in our uniforms. The guys would come from Boyd County and Russell and Greenup. They'd come in their uniforms, and we're all right there. So it was just, that was, it's a big deal. It's high school football at its best, and it was just I look back and just so thankful of things that I can't take credit for. Just people were putting my life and opportunities and playing at Ashland. I honestly felt later in life when I took some coaching job or teaching jobs, and I worked down in the western part of the state, Bowling Green, but there was a point I'd be around some other high school programs, and I just felt sorry sometimes for players that didn't have those experiences. I could see some of the coaches were just not as experienced or were as good as obviously the coaches that we had in our, in our life, in our era growing up. And it was just I felt kind of sad for them, but at the same time, so thankful that we grew up in the area we did, in this area and the tri-state,
right.
and to have influential people around us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, that brings us to your senior season, and a lot of anticipation really going into that season. I mean, I think you guys knew you were going to be pretty good. I don't know if you knew how good. You never know how good until you get out there and start playing. Interesting how the Jaws thing comes about, and I know you've all heard the stories. Coach Conley taking a trip to the beach like he did every summer, and his young boys they'd get too far out into the water, and his wife was not happy about that. So he said, "Boy, they got this shark movie going on. Let's go watch that." And they go watch it and get scared to death for Jaws, the movie. and of course, Coach is telling that to his coaches, coming in, and of course, Bill Tom, you can imagine he was probably all about it. Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it. And Coach Conley at first was kind of like, I don't know, guys, because, if this thing backfires on us, we can really look bad here. What do you remember about that, about the nickname and when it came about and how it came about, how you guys kind of embraced it?
Well, I think everything just kind of culminated right there that with I know early in the season we played Bryan Station. And I think right after that, I mean, it was really, we shot the number one right after that game. And I believe, Mark, if I remember correctly, it was like the second game of the season, I believe, wasn't it?
It was.
It
was, it was, yeah.
Early. And we're number one from that moment on all the way to the state championship game, the final game. And I just remember we did have a little bit of a lull mid-season at Huntington High.
Mm-hmm.
And Coach Conley threw us a curve on that. We came back and they took us to a movie. A movie, I guess, what was that called? An Earthquake or something at the time. And we
or was it it wasn't Earthquake. Shoot.
Was it?
It was Poseidon Adventure, wasn't it? Poseidon? Was it
yeah,
Poseidon?
You know what? It was just something that we thought we were going to have a tough practice. And we load up on a bus and head to the movie theater. Who does that? And and again, it's like it wasn't necessary. It wasn't so much the movie we saw; it was just the event they took us to. They took us to the movie theater, but going back to the Jaws, it's just we knew we had. I mean, when you have Chuck Anderson, Jay Shippey, Casey Jones, Yancey Ramey, you have all those, Kevin Ward. You got Mike Spark, Drake Jackson, Gary, and Mark
Terry
Maynard.
Bell.
You have that. You Terry Bell. You got the whole crew of guys that have just, been around each other so much and practice and those guys I mentioned, you think of Chuck, Casey, and Jay and Yancey and Terry Bell right in the middle. I mean, you got those guys.
Oh, yeah.
And we're defensive backs, man. Lord, a lot of times it was lucky we got to play plays. If those guys broke through, it was kind of rare. You just had to make the play and be there and fill in the gap for them. But just knowing we had those type of players, and to this day, I look at them and thinking, Lord, I'd like to play any team with those guys. And of course, Terry was he was offensive lineman of the year in the state of Kentucky. It was a huge honor. And and we played both ways. I mean, how many of those all played? Most of us all played both ways, and but to be a part of that team. And I tell you, when he put the Jaws on there, we took pride in that defense. And then I think sometimes you get into stats and things. I think some of them are a little bit. I think obviously they could have been better, but Coach Conley's always thinking about the team and making us better for the next opponent and down the road. Right. Those stats could have been a whole lot more impressive because we got ahead of some teams so well. They put some of the younger athletes in there, and sometimes there might be a little more stats against that Jaws team. But but the intimidation factor, I think too, when you label a team like that and that team goes to number one, you definitely have a target on you every year, on every game. So I'm even proud of that. Every team knows you're good and you're number one team in the country or in the state. So
Well, and it's hard enough being Ashland anyway. I mean, people want to beat Ashland regardless, but then on top of that, you're number one, so that makes it even worse. But Coach Conley says, I think it was maybe he says after the first game, and it kind of he accepted, okay, we can call it Jaws, and then it starts getting out, in the newspaper publishes, writes about it and calling the defense Jaws and whatnot. And the band plays the Jaws theme, and people, really kind of embrace that. I think they kind of rallied around that a little bit. And you see it. I mean, even 45 years later, it's not the 75 Tomcats, it's the Jaws Tomcats. It's the it's already got that. It's like labeled, and it's not derogatory or anything. It's like Jaws as in it's fierce. It's they're going to eat you up. They're going to all that. And so it didn't backfire for you guys for sure. Five times all season with double figures against you, just 5 games, out of the 15. So anyway, go ahead.
It was a heck of a marketing. It was a heck of a market. It was ahead of its time in marketing. In today's time frame, everybody does all this catchy marketing. And Lord, that was pretty incredible how it all timed up. And it was like Coach Conley. He wanted to make sure we backed it up. He puts a name on it like that, backed it up, and I tell you that picture. Who came up with the idea to take the picture with the Jaws legs?
I think it was Pat Himlett, who was with us at that time. I think I'm not. It might have been Mike Relaford. I don't know. It was one of the other. That was a great idea though, wasn't it? Putting the big movie letters.
We just had over there on the hill, put us on the hillside there, and had us all sit up there in our practice uniforms, and we'd all just kind of relaxed around each other. It was a great photo, great memory. I mean, I have that picture. But it was just everything came together. Sometimes the things just again, Mark, it's just like in life. There's so many things I've been blessed with, and have accomplished some things. But I just honestly tell people I can't take credit for that. That's just something I was just born by. My dad was a football coach. I got to play for one of his former players, Coach Conley, and it's just things that worked out really well for me in regards to football.
Yeah, you're a receiver on a team that heavy run. Obviously, you all rushed for over 4,000 yards, so you're not going to throw the ball that much. And Coach Conley wasn't somebody that threw the ball that much anyway. And you're running the wishbone, which is obviously a predominant run offense. Yet you end up with 340 yards receiving, and you end up scoring 8 touchdowns. But it's kind of interesting because you had a couple of punt returns for touchdowns, and one, of course, was against Bryan Station, and that was, Chuck Anderson's block is what they always talk about in that, not so much you scoring the touchdown.
No, that's all right.
The block that about knocked that guy's head off, and Coach Conley actually thought he'd knocked his head off. I know you didn't even see it because you were running. When you watch video of that, or do you feel sorry for that guy a little bit though?
Oh yeah, I do. Going back to the punt returns we had, I believe we had 5 returns that year, and Gary had 3, I had 2. And the thing, what was really good about that return was Gary and I would drop back. We were double return, so the punter, of course, they're having to do that now because these Aussie punters punt the ball down the alley. But right back then we had double returners. And so Gary and I would catch the ball, and they would either tell us, who would keep it, and we'd just run and fake the handoff to each other every time. So we always faked the handoff. So you never knew at the last second who got the ball. And Gary and I, we got real good at faking it out there. And so that just so happened on that play. It was my call, and I got to run the ball back. And I can look at the film. I didn't realize what happened. You hear even, they're cheering as you're going down. You hear the stadium get kind of loud. But then you hear like a burst of something. You don't realize. You look back, you don't know what happened, and then you see some guy laying over there. You knew somebody got hit pretty hard, But it just all happened. It was classic. That's the caliber of player we had on that defense. It's like Chuck.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going full throttle on a punt return. That was again Coach Conley, his intensity and. That he led the charge of getting us all, you hustle back to the huddle, you hustle to the sideline, you hustle to the football, wherever you make sure you're running, full throttle every play. And that's where, it didn't surprise me Chuck made that shot. I mean, it was time to hit somebody for Chuck. He didn't care.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was like a nose guard on that play because he was the guy that, they always want him to hit the center just to maybe he'll make a bad snap the next time, thinking about, getting hit by this guy. So he clobbers the center and then runs dead sprint, to make a block downfield, and probably had a 15, 20-yard run on that guy who really and truly probably wasn't going to get you. I mean, I think you were pretty much past him. It was going to be difficult for him to get you, but that poor guy never saw it coming. And Greg Jackson's probably told you he talked to that guy later in life.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he sure did.
What'd he say?
He said, "Oh my gosh!" I mean, he said it because he said he went to Bryan Station and he played football, and he's like, told him the year and he played at Putnam Stadium. That's what they were talking about. And he's like, "You're on that Bryan Station team?" And he's like, "Yeah." He said, whatever happened to the guy that just got clobbered on that punt return? And he said, "I'm that guy."
Oh my!
But
no,
talking to Coach Conley about it, he said he thought he'd really killed him. He said, "I thought his head had come off because when he hit him, his helmet popped up in the air." He said, "I thought he'd knocked his head off." He said, "I really did." He's like, "Oh my gosh, he's killed him."
It's just you don't see a hit like that with the helmet coming off so quick. I mean, just to have he hit that he just right. I tell you, the tackling back then was a lot different than teaching today. You just go, you just full throttle at it.
That's probably that might have been they might have called it targeting. Today. That play. But it wasn't. That's not how it was back then. The blocks like that. So, but obviously, you all obviously worked a lot on punt returns, kick returns, and I remember the reverses every time. The fake sometimes and not sometimes, and obviously, I mean, how many teams returned 5 punts for touchdowns? I mean, that wasn't an accident. That was the blocking was set up. It was all well executed.
Well, that was the thing again about playing at Ashland. The coaching. We worked on the special teams back then. I mean, that was it's just that was an important part of the game. We worked on that, and I'll tell you something about the Bryan Station game too. That team was a good team, and on their team, I played at Eastern Kentucky with one of their great players. They had one of the fastest guys on their team was a down lineman named Joe Richard. Joe Richard played at Eastern Kentucky, and he's a Hall of Famer down at Eastern. I mean, he's the one that actually made the block of a field goal. It led us into a national championship game, and he was on that Bryan Station team. So there were some great players on that team, and they had all kinds of speed. So it was just a tremendous game for us to, that was our moment right there where we became number one.
Yeah, and that was all year. Second game of the year, 22-12 win at that point, and that was in the midst of rattling off, 14 straight wins. Obviously through the season, I guess the biggest game maybe through the regular season, there's a couple. I think one was Ironton. They had Kenny Fritz, who was a Ohio State commit, and they were loaded too. They were a really good team. And that game was at Putnam as well. I remember there were so many people at that game. Oh my goodness, that place was packed, and everybody expecting a great game. And it was 14-0. A rock'em sock'em game. Gary Thomas rushed for 103 yards, and Jeff Sloan rushed for 72, and you guys shut them down, shut them out. And that was that spoke well for Jaws too, I think.
Right, especially that team with a future college All-American on that team. Like you said, it goes to Ohio State, Kenny Fritz. So it was those are great. That's the biggest game crowd-wise I ever remember at Putnam Stadium. That was just unbelievable there, that game.
Oh, of course, Ironton's, they're great at supporting their teams too, obviously. So it wasn't too surprising. I guess we kind of mentioned the Huntington High game, which was probably the only other regular season game where the outcome was in doubt. And, tough game. Yeah, you guys win 12-6, don't play well. And Coach Conley said, he just said, I was mad going to the game, and he wasn't feeling good. He had a cold or something. I can't remember what he said. He had something. They stopped and got him some medicine even, So he wasn't really at himself, I guess, in that game. And he said, we never played well up there. It's just something about Huntington that he just didn't like. And it was, if I remember right, it was a rainy night too, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was kind of a rainy, misty night. And, we were playing on the turf, which is kind of a distraction. It's probably more, back then, it was like so unique to play on artificial turf.
Yeah.
So we had to have turf shoes, and there's just a lot of little things that kind of happened. Plus, I had a couple things happen in that game that was kind of unique. Well, we laughed about it later on in life, but in that game there was a play, and it was at a crucial time. And Coach Ross, he'd tell you to this day, he'd say he'd been begging Coach Conley to throw the football in the game, throw the football. He had a pass to throw to me, and so we get in the huddle. We're going in toward the scoreboard. The Tomcat fans are on the the visiting side or opposite press box, and so we're going in to trying to score. And Chuck comes in again in the huddle, and Coach Ross finally got the play called that he'd been wanting, the pass play. Well, Chuck comes in and calls the play, and Mark, I thought, Chuck, I'm looking right at him, and I thought he said right 63. I can still remember this day, and that was a straight down out cut. It was just like an out cut. I had to go about 10 yards and take a quick out. And in what he called when we ran the play, I go down the field, make my route, cut my route. I'm wide open, and I look at Chuck, and he's over on the opposite side in the backfield, just setting up real pretty, getting ready to throw a screen pass to the other side. And the guys were lined up there getting ready to block, and I'm looking up there, and I'm thinking, oh, my gosh, he called right 80 screen. I thought he said right 63. So I'm running an out route. They're all set up for a screen pass. Chuck gets sacked. Coach Ross, in that stadium, I can hear him yelling, Rick, sing! Rick, he yelled and echoed and echoed and echoed. We go to defense, and I still hear him over there yelling, Rick, sing! He's still yelling at me. And finally we get off on the sideline, and he is so mad. He is so mad from that play. And I said, Coach, I thought he called right 63, but think about it, right 63 or right 60 screen,
Yeah.
And so I just misunderstand. That's so crucial in play calling that you pay. And Lord, think of this. I always look back, and I tried to tell Coach Ross, Coach, I want the football. I would have, if I known that was coming, I want the football. He was so mad at it. We got somebody snapped a picture, and I still got it on my wall. It's a little small snapshot, a little picture. Coach Ross got a hold of my face mask, and he's in my face. And that's the moment I came off the sideline, and he was on me on that. He'd always tell me, he said, Rick, he'd always say, Rick, I'm glad we won that football game because you and I have been walking back to Ashland. You and I have been walking back to Ashland. he would not let that go forever. He was so mad at me. But it was great for him. It was just sometimes, you realize how crucial something could have made a difference. And fortunately, we scored a touchdown there and beat them and got out of there and maintained our season. But it was right. It was just one of those games that thank goodness you won it, but that kind of happened at that game.
And of course, you all thought we have had it in practice because we played terrible.
Oh yeah,
we know it, and that's when, of course, he, as you mentioned earlier, he said, "Load up, boys." And you probably all thought, "What are we going to do?"
Yeah,
and it takes you to
it
the
did.
moon.
It's he did. It was one. It's funny that thank goodness we did something like that. And then Coach Ross and I laughed about it. He told me I even sent him a Christmas card, that picture. He said I even wrote he goes, Ricky even wrote the play wrong. Send him in the Christmas card on that picture. I was kind of joking about it later on. He said, "You got it wrong, sending it in the Christmas break." He teased me so much about that play. And
That's funny.
I tell you something else happened in that game that nobody, my dad, my parents knew, but my dad had coached at Huntington High, and at that point he was at Huntington East. But at Huntington High, he had some coaches there he had worked with on that staff, and
Right.
And I'd made a tackle on a player, a Huntington High player, over by their sideline, and one of their coaches, I mean, he came out there and yelled at me and started yelling, saying bad stuff about my dad. Said something about my dad. And I, as a young high school kid, you know, I'm kind of like, I'm looked at him and then I'm mad. I'm kind of like, I couldn't believe he did it. He was just trying to say something about my dad or something as a coach. I don't know. He just trying to rile me, you know, just trash talking.
Trying to get
I was just so taken. Yeah, you know, I was so disappointed, and then I got ticked. And at the end of the game, when we won, I was heading over to the sideline to say something to him. And I was just really upset about it. You know, I let it get to me, you know, but anyway, and on my way over, somebody, the fans were celebrating, so I got grabbed by somebody, and so I got kind of detoured. And I remember my parents said, "Where were you going?" I said, "Well, I told them what happened, and told my dad." And then the funny thing that happened, the man, I don't even know we need to mention his name, but this is how kind of funny how things happen in life. But later on, back in the 90s, I'm up there in Huntington, and Dad's playing a game, and I drove all the way in from Bowling Green. So I come down on the field with him, and he said, he goes, "Hey, Rick, come here a second. Somebody wants to say something to you." And it was that coach. This was later in the 90s. You're like talking about 20-some years later. Wow. And this man comes up to me, and he grabs me, and he says, "Rick, I'm so-and-so." He said, "I said something to you on the sideline back during that game in 1975. He said, "I just want to apologize." He said, "I'm so sorry. I should never have said something. I apologize." And he shook my hand and hugged me.
Wow.
And he said that to me, and then when he left, my dad had some tears in his eyes. He said, "Rick, he's dying. He's dying of cancer."
Oh, my
and he wanted to come and say that. So the man was struggling with some things, and it bothered him too. And I guess when I hugged him back and just, you know, just thanked him for saying, I was really touched by him saying that, because I thought, you know, and then I thought, you know, it bothered me, but then I thought it bothered him too. Mm-hmm. You know, I think at the heat of the moment in the game, he said something, and you know, so anyway, it was a good ending. You know, a good ending.
Wow.
And he said he was out there with my dad, and then my dad loved the man. He just one of those football things you just kind of got to deal with.
Right. So after, you know, that game, obviously that movie trip calmed everybody down, and you guys just rolled your last three opponents: Belfry, Covington Catholic, and then Boyd County, which obviously Boyd was pretty good. You know, they had they were, even though they didn't have Channing Keelan, they were still pretty good, and they thought they could play with you, I think, you know, that year. That was Tackett, right? James Tackett was on that team.
Yeah,
Tackett was a heck of a running back. Yeah.
Mark Maynard was the player.
Oh yeah, he was a great player.
Mark Maynard.
So they had some good ones still, you know, left over from that team. And the game's out in Cannonsburg. Obviously, you all have to win or you don't go to the playoffs. So, you know, there's a lot of that online. But you all, 43-0, just not even close. Were you all that fired up for that game, or did, you know, it'd been 2 years? Obviously, you'd played Boyd close twice against their better teams, you know, and lost both of them.
Plus, we were playing out there. We were fired up. You know, Mark, but I may have told you this before, but, you know, every game, it just seemed like I never really felt, and I believe the other guys would say the same thing, I never really felt overconfident on anything back then. Every game, I remember a game I was really concerned about, Barbersville. They had Richie Boyd, that great quarterback. And I mean, if any game I thought was going to be challenging, because you didn't, you know, back then you had to, you know, people didn't throw the ball that much, and he could throw it. He could just throw it and preparing for them. And then all of a sudden in the game, you know, our guys, just somebody, I forgot who hit him, but somebody hurt him right there early in the game and knocked him out of the game. and then they were just done from there. But you know, it was just every game, and I think the Boyd County game happened to be the last game to be a rival. We were going to be undefeated in the season for sure. Not going to let that slide. And plus, it was out there, so I think we started off like it was going to be an intense, close game, but then it wasn't. It was just we just
right.
kind of. Plus, it was 3-0. We had defense again, played extremely well.
Interesting in that game too. I'm sure Boyd County was, you know, putting 11 guys on the line of scrimmage practically, you know, to try to stop the wishbone and try to slow Thomas down and Shippey and Jackson and Sloan and all those guys. Chuck Anderson threw for season high 159 yards, and you had 75 yards receiving in that game as well. So that, you know,
Boyd County game.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I guess they were trying to stop the run, which you have to, you know, to have any chance, you're going to have to stop you all from just controlling the ball the whole night.
Yeah, I remember scoring one touchdown there in that old stadium. I tell you one thing, and I said Mark Maynard's name. That was one tough football player, and I don't know what the deal was, but Mark, when I was playing defensive back, for some reason, he'd come off the line, and he would come out there and try to hit me. He was one player during that game I had to continually watch out for, because he would release, and he was kind of like a Chuck Anderson for Boyd County. He just would come, and it seemed like he was just looking to hit me all the time. And so as a defensive back, I always had to watch him. Just sometimes it's funny when you go back and you're thinking of teams you played, and you earn respect on the field for some tough football players. There's some tough guys out there that just get your attention, and he was definitely one of them.
Yeah, he was a great one. He really was good. I went to church with him. He's a good guy too. He's a really good guy.
Well, there's a contrast. He went to church. He's over at church with him he's just like a nice guy. And then on a football field, man, people knock my head off.
That's funny. So I got to talk about this first playoff game. You all played Dixie Heights. Of course, it was the coldest night. Just like, you know, freezing cold night, as it is often in Northern Kentucky. But tell us about that game. You all end up winning pretty easily, but it wasn't such a good halftime, if that's a good analogy.
Well, something you'll know more about this than I did. And again, I didn't think about this. We didn't complain. That's the thing about, you know, this day and time. There's people know so much about how things are run and done. But like in that game, here we are, the number one team in the country, or I keep saying country, but state, the number one team in the state, and we have to go away. We're playing away games, and and at the time, as a high school kid, I didn't think anything of it. I mean, it's just another game to us. We got to play, go win. We didn't even no complaint. But I'm looking back thinking they all should have come to us. But I know they structured things differently, didn't they?
Right.
Was that structured differently then? You had to go away?
Yeah. Well, it was odd and even, depending on your district. If you were an even district, it was your turn to host. If you're odd, you know, that's the way they did it back then. You know, it wasn't based on anything other than that. You know, it depended on if your region was odd or even, or if your district was odd or even. That's how they determined it.
Yeah, I just didn't. Well, we had to play there. It was definitely colder. It was definitely colder at that game up there, and I know we didn't play very well. And we were, you know, the thing is, I remember we were better than that team. We were just so much better, but we didn't play well. And Coach Conley saw it, but at halftime, what I think you're alluding to is he brought everybody in at halftime, and I honestly I never had heard of this or never saw this coming. Didn't see it, but he was ticked, and he got the captains. He got myself and Chuck and Terry Bell, Chuck Anderson, Terry Bell, myself, and had us all in front of the team look in the mirror, look at ourselves in the mirror. And he was just going on to how we're leaders. You know, he was just everything to just get up. He was coming at. He felt the captains of the team. You know, he was. You know, which was Coach Conley's. I mean, he didn't care if you're the captain or you're a freshman. He's going to be on you if he feels it's needed. He knew how to press the buttons. He knew how to push us, and so he got after us and made us look at each, say, look at yourself in the mirror, look at yourself. I can remember that at halftime. We didn't do a whole lot of strategy talking. He just knew we had the game plan. We knew we had the players. We knew we were better. Look at yourself and get out there and play football, and so I always joked about it. I tell people whenever I bring it up, I get nervous today still whenever I shave in the morning, look at myself in the mirror, because Coach Conley always that mirror moment. I just kind of joke about it, but he was right. We came back out the second half, and it was one of those classic moments of how a coach knows how to handle the players and press the buttons. And of course, you're talking to Chuck Anderson. Chuck Anderson's just geared for that kind of stuff. And Terry Bell's kind of cool, calm, collected. And Terry knows he's better than everybody on that football field, and he was, and how good he was as an athlete. He knew he'd get his job done, and I had to get my dang job done. And it was funny. I didn't really know what I did wrong, but I just knew he didn't think I was playing up to par. And I know, fortunately, we won the game, moved on the playoffs. I remember coming back the next Monday. He'd had the films, and we're getting ready to go to that next playoff game. And I remember he catches me in the hallway, and I'm thinking he's still mad at me, and he comes to Rick saying, get over here, come over here. And so he puts his arm around me, and he said, I just want you to know, he said, we looked at game field. He said, you didn't play that bad after all. Then he turns around and walks off. And I'm thinking, man, you had me in the mirror. He goes, you looked at that game film, you didn't play it bad after all. So then he heads off, and it's always just funny how, but that's just classic Coach Conley. But he in the moment that was needed, and boy, it was memorable. So fortunately, we won that game. But it was an unbelievably cold night, probably the coldest game I think. This is one of the coldest ones I ever played in my entire career. I mean, that was just really tough. So fortunately, we won that game.
Yeah, it's right there on the river, Ohio River. You get that wind off the river, and freezing cold night. So the next week you play Lexington Lafayette. I'm guessing Lafayette must have upset Bryan Station the week before, because I don't know why Bryan Station, wouldn't have been in that slot. Because I know they were the same class as you guys. So I don't know. I haven't really done the research on that to know. But at any rate, anytime you're playing one of those Lexington schools, they're good. They're going to be good every time. But that game is at home. It's your last home game, and you guys win 21-6. So good, just a good hard fought win, I'm sure. That the next week. Now you're set up and you have to go on the road again, as you say, which is kind of weird, but this is no ordinary road trip, because it's in Paducah. It's Paducah Tillman, and as we talked earlier, Kentucky's such a long state, that was probably like a 10-hour drive, and a 10-hour drive in a bus is like a 24-hour ride probably, and
right.
Only at Ashland would the boosters come up with enough money to fly a football team across the state. But that's exactly what happened. What's your recollections of that?
Well, I just remember that happening pretty quick. Somebody put that money together. I don't know who all did it. It seemed like Ashland Oil was involved in it, if I was remembering right. But they organized, somebody had that idea, and this is classic Ashland. They made it happen. And I'd never flown in my life. I think most people on the whole team didn't fly, hadn't flown on the plane. It wasn't, you're about 5 years past, 5 years earlier, the Marshall plane crash.
Right.
That was kind of quietly discussed, sometimes people, it was a very impacting part of our life, where, something like that, so tragic to have happened that and you never flown. So that was in it there, but I think the excitement of flying down there and the team and everybody getting together and do that was just, and I think it was the first time that had ever happened in the state of Kentucky. Somebody had flown to an high school athletic team.
Might be the only time. I don't know many teams. Maybe Trinity or St. X, some of these private schools. Possibly, I guess. But
I don't know what the world would they have flown to. It's just kind of like it happened to be Ashland, Paducah, so that made the sense. Since doing that, and so that was. And then you knew how good Paducah Tillman. You always just knew how good they were. And I think they had won a state championship prior to that, not too in recent times. I think they had won in 73 or something like that. So we knew they were really good, and they had a really good player on their team too.
They beat Boyd County in what would have been your sophomore year in the championship game. As a matter of fact, they beat the Keelan Taney junior year team out of Boyd County. But yeah, you knew they were good. You knew they were going to be good, and I'm sure you all watched some film on them and whatnot too. So anyway, but yeah, go ahead. Traveling all the way down there, and you're there ready to play. Did you all go down the night? The day of or the night?
I believe it was the night. Oh, you know what, Mark? I believe that's a good question.
Surely it was the night before.
Yeah, I don't remember staying the night down there though. I remember. I guess we did. We probably.
Maybe not. You could have left that morning because it was a chartered flight.
I remember. I think we might have done that and flown back the next morning. I guess. Well, when was that parade? Was it the next day? Wasn't it? We flew back in.
It was the next day. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we stayed. I think we stayed the night after the game, didn't we? And then we came back, maybe.
Yeah, you might be right.
But it was.
I guess somebody drove the equipment down.
Got the equipment down there. I don't remember taking all that on the plane.
Yeah.
But they had the cheerleaders were on the plane, the coaches, and I remember the pilot. He kind of got our name confused. He said something about "Good luck, Ashland Bobcats." I remember the pilot saying he was like, "No, Tomcats." It's rare to hear the. But it's funny funny thing high school kids remember, But we got down there. It was another one of those games, we knew what we were getting into, and it was a tough football game, to play those guys. And it was funny. I remember that I had my longest and my shortest punt in the same game, and I shouldn't say shortest punt. It was short because it got partially blocked. And it was at a crucial time too. It was a crucial time, but they partially blocked a punt of mine, and I think it was 12 yards. And then I had a 68-yarder.
Oh wow!
So it was. And I remember that because, it was just that we needed to win that football game, and I think Gary broke a long run there toward the end to help us win. And the thing I felt I could do was just block, block best I could for them, but it was just a tough fought football game with those guys. And I was lined up as a tight end against probably the best defensive end I'd ever faced. Man, that guy was a great player, and he was tough to. It was hard to handle him. The guy was a much better defensive player, for a little guy, 175-pound guy like me trying to block. But they were a great player, and but we got out of there all right with the win. And that was a tough one. It was a long. Again, think of how the number one ranked team the entire year in the highest classification in the state of Kentucky, and we had to travel all the way to Paducah. So you think about how good we had to be as a team to even win on the road at these other places when we're the number one ranked team.
Right. I mean, two of your first three playoff games are on the road, and of course, it was weird back then. Class 4A was the biggest. It was everybody. And really what you all played when you played Paducah, that was like all the state, the entire state, except Jefferson County. And Jefferson County played their own tournament, basically, and determined the champion out of Jefferson County. And then you basically play the Super Bowl, with the Jefferson County winner playing the state at large champion, which, and that's why people, a lot of people consider that a state championship because, even the trophy says state at large champion, And
to think if it was 74, that was a state championship.
Right.
It would have been if it had been the 74 season and then the 75. That's my understanding. That's when they changed it. But and plus, so we flew to play the opposite end of the state for the state championship. It would have been the same way in 74. I know it's ifs and buts looking back, but it's like sometimes people don't realize what we were up against at that point. you know, to
Right.
you know, I do the state at large championship, and compared to any other Ashland team there's ever been, you know, they changed they moved the goalposts on us that year. So,
they did.
But again, we were excited to be a part of it and everything,
Right.
and there's nothing you can do. But it is funny when you look back in the record books, people don't realize the story behind all that.
Yeah, there's more to the story. Yeah, of course you play. You're all 14-0, and you're going to play St. X at the fairgrounds in the basic Super Bowl kind of game. What did you all think going into that? You saw the film, and what were the coaches saying, and how did you all approach that game?
Well, that was definitely one where we really believed, you know, you're playing a Louisville team. Nobody had played Louisville teams outside the state for the championships. So you're playing a team there's some unknowns there. How really good are they? And, you know, but then you find out too, you know, you may know this better than I do, but their roster number was dramatically different than ours, you know. So we're getting fed that information a little bit, but, you know, and not that they're better than us, but they have more people than us. And so it was kind of, that was how it was kind of still. We had just as good a skilled players on our team than they did. And I really believe that because, you know, they had some really good, I got to play with one of their best players that wasn't even marquee at the time. You didn't know him, but his name's Bob McIntyre. He's another Hall of Fame player at Eastern, was All-American in college. He was a defensive end, but Carl Marilla and Rick Beener and some of those guys got more of the attention. But we knew they were going to be well coached, and they had already won a state championship, I believe. I think they won some before. I'm not sure on the previous one, but they were on and they were on a roll too. We were in our 14th game, and I think they were 12-0, and we were 14-0. And it was just exciting. I mean, the town, the school, the atmosphere is like I've never seen before and never seen again. The atmosphere in a high school football program like we had in the Ashland community. It was just no one. I mean, I tell people when I've coached or something, said we flew to a high school game, you know, and they might fly to a high school game now, maybe for, you know, these ESPN Texas plays somebody in Florida or something. Right. IMG or something, but back to fly within your own state back in the 70s was just unheard of. So, but then to go to Louisville and to be in the state championship game at the fairgrounds, at the at the biggest venue you could be in the state was just huge for us.
Yeah. Of course, you all hung with them too. You know, certainly for a half. In fact, you drove it down the field. I think first time you all had the ball, you drove it, you know, inside the 5 and, you know, had a penalty and all that. Then I think Jimmy Johnson missed a field goal maybe, and that was, you know, that was certainly disappointing for you guys, I'm sure, you know, because you could have got ahead of them for sure, you know, if not for a couple of bad breaks.
We had a couple, just some things didn't go our way when I don't know. I mean, I don't want to disappoint Coach Conley or anybody. I just think, you know, I really felt we were, if they had to pull out their players, their best 11 and our best 11, and they leave everybody else, you know, out there, then that might be a different. But I'm not sure. I believe they just had maybe one or two players. I don't even know if they had two players go both ways.
Yeah.
And
new players coming in every time.
I think I'm 1 of 7. I personally, and that's the only game I can honestly remember, I was never on the sideline in that game. Wow. Never on the sideline once for that game. And they would you'd see them platoon the players in there. And I don't have anything again. I think the Catholic school system is, I mean, that's incredible up there, what they do. But it's just, you know, it's just a different, when you're bringing a independent school district, you know, where you wherever the kids live, they're coming to that school, whereas opposed those players could come in there. It's just, but since that time now, I think those teams have been a little more competitive, but it's also some of your high schools in the state that are beating them are a whole lot bigger.
Oh, yeah.
So, you
And they
got that
and
Warren
they still don't
stuff.
and they don't beat them often. You know, they very
No.
seldom beat them. You know,
No,
I mean,
like South Warren and those teams down there. Those are huge schools where you might have 2,000 kids, and we had I don't know how many in our school at that time, but it was just small. But it was what an experience. It was one of those you just would love to have won it for the Ashland, the tradition, and Coach Conley, and anybody second guessing us today. I'd like to. We'd won that. Nobody would be saying anything about that. But what a great experience! It really was.
Yeah, I think you guys were behind 6-0 at the half, and like you said, I think their depth just kind of wore you down, and Trinity or St. X, I'm sorry, St. X ends up winning 20-0. Gary Thomas rushed for 107 yards, and you all had about 200 yards rushing in that game, so it's not like they totally just dominated there or something. You all still were able to move the ball some. Just think that first time down the field, maybe putting them behind, who knows, how they might react to that, because they probably hadn't trailed much all year, in that. But nevertheless, a great season, 14-1, and postseason, you get named All-State as a receiver. And I we've talked about this. You had a great punting year, and you remember as a junior when Mike Goffard was first team All-State punter, and so you thought maybe I have a chance with that, right?
I thought I did. I had over a 40-yard punting average. And I had I was really hoping to get that. It's funny. I was kind of probably an odd guy back then, but I just kind of I loved the punt. And I was just really proud of that. And Mike had made it. I remember the headline, Tomcat Ace to Punt, when I had Mike Gothard on there. And then, of course, fortunately, I was behind Mike. And so I thought, well, maybe I fill in, his shoes there a little bit. Mike he'd tease me in recent years, we'd say something. He goes, I was the better punter. And he'd say stuff, and I'd say, yeah, you were. And he was, but and then he didn't punt in college, but I really wanted to make that, and for some reason, they did not even mention that in the state of Kentucky that year. I just thought it was so super odd. They didn't even have a punter listed as All-State that year. Why they would just totally not mention that. But it was just one of those things I was proud of. I'd worked hard to do that, but I was really proud to be a part of be a receiver. They had the Courier Journal came out, I think. They had the 4A All-State first team came out, and I was fortunate to be on that All-State team at Courier Journal. So I was real proud of that. And I tell you what, Mark, they had that Tomcat board, and I've told this to people, but over in the lobby used to have that Ashland Tomcat All-State board over there in the lobby above there. It used to be there years ago. I mean, just all I had was had that on there, and I used to walk in. The first time I ever noticed that board, Dad had taken me to give Coach Conley some film or something. They were doing something, and so Dad said, "Why don't you run in with?" I was like in middle school, and the first time I met Coach Conley, I'm in that hallway by the pool going out back toward his office. He's right there, and so Dad's talking to him, and Dad had already prepared me years ago. Whenever I meet coaches or people, look them in the eye and give a good firm handshake. So he already coached me up, so I knew the drill. When I got in, he said, "Rick, this is Coach Conley." And I reached up there and I shook his hand and I said, "Nice to meet you, Coach." And I remember Coach Conley saying, "Good handshake." He said, that boy's got a good handshake. And he said, and I remember Coach Conley saying, "And he's lean." He told me I was lean. And Mark honestly didn't even know what he meant. He said he's lean. But he said it in a way to Dad, like Dad would be proud of it. And I said, made me feel good. But he said, "Yep, good handshake and he's lean." And I was just a little scrawny guy. But anyway, when I was coming in that lobby and leaving, I remember on that All-State board, I looked up there and I'd see Ashland Tomcat All-State football. And when I finally came to Blazer and I walked in that hallway, I would walk in the lobby. Every time I walk in the lobby, I'd look up there and say, Ashland Tomcat All-State football, Rick Sane. Every time I looked at that board, I was Ashland Tomcat All-State football, Rick Sane. I just say my name. Well, later in life, I didn't realize that's like positive affirmation type thing. You're just kind of conditioning your mind. That, if your mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. And but I did that every day, and I'll never forget when that came in on the newspaper. I made first team All-State, and they put my name on that board. It was just like I had set a goal and didn't even realize I'd set it and accomplished it. So that was a huge deal. That was
that's pretty cool.
That point in my life. But again, you know, I grew up. My dad was a football coach, and then I get around Coach Conley and Coach Ross, and just the Ashland tradition, and just so many people were put in front of me, just like all the other guys on the team can say. I mean, we're all, you know, that bond of playing on a football team and going to two-a-days and football camp and playing for Coach Conley. It's just we're all in a real tight-knit fraternity there.
All right. Of course, you keep wearing maroon in college. Played 4 years at Eastern, and you're on the 1979 1AA national championship team as a receiver, starting receiver, and a punter. And then you coached on the next 3 years, which you all made it to the 1AA championship every year, and won it, I guess, in '82 as well, right? 80, is that right?
82, 79, 80, 79 and 1982, and then we also runner-up 80, 81. Last second lost in 80. You had a back-to-back, but they're considered Eastern's considered the dynasty in the 1AA during that era.
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt.
Great team, great players, and played for Roy Kidd.
Oh yeah, played for Roy. I know those times were special for your mom and dad too, who, you know, that they could see you play on a Saturday, so and did, you know, many times. Probably drove to a lot of crazy places from the OVC and got to watch you play, and you know that's great, you know. So pardon? Go ahead.
I was just say they were like, actually during that, they were like little young newlyweds. They would after Dad's game, they'd jump in the car and they'd head down, stay in a hotel down in Richmond, and they just, you know, had breakfast. They'd come to game early, you know. It was a big deal, and thank God later in life, I didn't realize at the time, but later in life, my mom and dad both would catch me by myself sometimes. We'd be sentimental about stuff, and they'd say, you know, Rick, that's the happiest times in our life. We were watching, you know, going to those football games. So, you know, right before they passed, you know, hear them say that, and they really were. We had some really good times, and I was, again, I mean, my last high school football game, they saw me play with state championship, you know, down there for the state championship in Louisville, and then the last college football game, they saw me play. We won the national championship, 1AA. So we had a great ride there, and being a part of it. And I wouldn't have been in Eastern Kentucky without Coach Conley. I mean, Coach Conley was instrumental in that. Of course, Coach Conley's former college coach was Roy Kidd. And all that started coming together there. But I would not have been at Eastern if it wasn't for Coach Conley, you know, encouraging, you know, Coach Kidd to look at me and give me a chance to play down there.
Well, it's hard to believe a guy that played 7 seconds in the Kiwanis Bowl as a freshman would go on to have the career you had, you know, high school, college, and even today. You know, your all kicking camp has helped so many players, so many great players, and you know, and I know all that, and with Ray, and you know, we'll get into that story another time for sure. But with Ray Guy, you know, I really feel like he was great. I mean, greatest punter ever, there's no doubt, and deserved to be in the Hall of Fame. But I think, you know, you kept his name out there, Rick, and I think that was crucial to him finally getting his due. I mean, he deserved to be in there. There's no question about it. And I'm not saying you put him in there, but you didn't hurt any either, for sure. So yeah. I'm glad that worked out for him, you know, and you, for that matter.
Well, yeah, I hope it helps somebody. He obviously had already done all the on the field things that was needed. It was just, but his name was kind of getting lost in the shuffle, and I was fortunate to be a part of you know, when they started the Ray Guy War. That was really crucial, and then starting the kicking camps. The really neat thing about the kicking camps, about every national type thing that Ray got attention for, they would always bring up his kicking camps, and so it was kind of a great thing for people to talk about it. I met some tremendous people through that. I even got to talk to John Madden on the telephone on behalf of Ray, and I mean, so there's so many doors that were open with Ray and meeting some tremendous people. But I'm like, yeah, I really, it gave him a really good positive after football image. And I think, Al Davis, the former owner of the Raiders there, he said it best when Ray had the punting award named after him, that just cemented him into history right there. When they did the college punting honor. So those are things I was fortunate to be a part of and to have met him. Right. But I'll tell you something, I just want to kind of touch on, if you don't mind, is Coach Conley. Everybody, we all know Coach Conley, all the guys growing up. I mean, Lord, Jana, my wife, it doesn't matter who you are. Everybody remembers and has. I don't know one person. I've never met one person in my life that doesn't like Coach Conley and respect him. I just never have. And just, like going to Eastern and playing down there, I met some people that have been I'll just tell you a real quickly story. When I went down to my dentist of 40 years, he just passed. He just died. He had that ALS, that Lou Gehrig's disease, and he just retired less than a year ago. And Freddie Ballou, he was inducted in the Kentucky High School Hall of Fame. And I remember when he found out, he knew I went to Ashland, and he knew I played. Of course, everybody called him Herbie Conley. And he said he played, he knew Herbie Conley. And Freddie didn't play, but he was a student at Eastern, and he remembered him and had the greatest respect for him because Coach Conley, evidently, somebody was picking on Freddie. He wasn't a big guy and was picking on him, and Coach Conley nipped that in the bud real quick when he found out somebody was messing with Freddie, and Freddie had never forgotten that. And Dr. Coy is another doctor down there I met through Eastern. And all these came about because of Coach Conley getting me to coach kids so I could play ball down there. And then another doctor who I've said was telling him about Coach Conley. He said, "You mean you played football for Herbie Conley?" So it's amazing how many people. That was a doctor down in Richmond that knew Coach Conley from playing football in the Recreation Bowl in Mount Sterling. And right when Freddie was at one of his worst times there, he wanted to talk to Coach Conley. And Coach Dr. Coy, got him Coach Conley's number, and Coach Conley called down there and talked to him. And Freddie wanted to talk to him. So here's a man that was going through obviously the toughest time of his life. He wanted Coach Conley to talk to him, who was just a friend that took up for him in college. And then you were mentioning Paducah Tillman. That Dan Haley was the head coach of Paducah Tillman. I was in Bowling Green. I was playing golf one time with him, and I said, I was on that Tomcat team that beat y'all. And he gave me that funny look. Like, he was the head coach of that team, and he had nothing but great things to say about Coach Conley. But Coach Conley just, as well as I do. I mean, there's so many connections. You've talked about this and written about the connections of people in Ashland, but there's a whole lot of connections with Coach Herb Conley. So, and then just love him to death. He's just a great man, but there's a lot of things that would not have happened in my life if it wasn't for him. So I'm very thankful there.
Wow. Well, it's been fun going through your journey there. I think people are really going to enjoy it too, Rick. And I appreciate you taking some time to do that. And I think we'll get this up and let people listen to it and listen to your story. And you've been a great. I know. I do want to say this too. For folks who might not know, you have helped a lot of Ashland kickers and punters, and you do it at your own expense. You've helped Tony Love and Leon Hart both, I think, with different players, and I know they appreciate that, and I'm sure the Tomcat world appreciates that as well, because they've had some good ones here lately. So, I don't know if you can take all the credit for that, but that may be part of it anyway.
Well, the credit, Coach Love does a phenomenal job, with his players, and anything, if I have something I can help him. But I tell you what, he's always texting me and telling me and asking, and he's just so passionate. It's an honor to help him. I love working with him, and those players, it's because of him. He gets them to come to the camp, encourages them, and tells them, and then those kids want to do it, and they want to play for him and excel for him. And so I give a whole lot of credit to Coach Love there, and I'm thankful. I tell him every time, thanks for letting me let me help any way I can. And
Yeah.
and I'll tell you something quickly about Leon Hart. I didn't say this, but when I go to Eastern, I don't know if a lot of people don't realize this. Again, the connection of Ashland, it kind of made full circle. But my first coach at Eastern was a GA named Leon Hart. And he was the receiver coach. Leon came in and he later became the quarterback coach and the coordinator. Did a great job there on those championship teams. But Leon was he was a heck of a coach, and it was really a joy to be with him when I first started down there, because he was a young coach just getting started. And then I remember when he took the Ashland job, and it was one of those jobs we kind of say, he was asking me about it, and I said, Coach, they expect to win. You're going to be in a unique environment. Next, he said, I wouldn't want to be any place other than a place that doesn't expect that. I said, well, they do in Ashland, and it's going to be the most unique experience you've ever been around to see how they follow football on Friday nights. And obviously he did well, but I'm anything I can do to help Ashland. It's one of those things I enjoy, and I'm just glad that Coach Love even, asked me if there's some way I can contribute. I'm just fortunate, asked me, or if I call him that he allows me to. So, and but he's the coach, and I've always learned that from my dad a long time ago. He's the coach, and you're there to help, and that's it. You're not coaching, you're just helping. So, and he needs you, he'll ask you. So that's the way I do it. But Coach Love is so passionate about it, like Coach Conley was, and so he does a great job, and I'm happy to have so much success.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that was Rick Thang, and we'll sign off for now. But join us again next time. See you all later.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for all you do, Mark.